It is the year 1284. A merchant in Venice is settling a debt. He doesn't reach for coins. He doesn't hand over silver. He opens a small wooden box and counts out dried flower threads, each one thinner than a human hair and deep crimson red. 45 of those threads weigh 1 gram. And at that moment in history, that single gram is worth more than the same weight in gold. The spice is saffron. And for over 3,000 years, every civilization that got its hands on this flower used it for the same thing: medicine. The Egyptians used it. The Greeks prescribed it. The Romans bathed in it. Medieval doctors across Europe and the Islamic world built entire treatment systems around it. Then something happened. Over the last 100 years, saffron went from the most prized healing substance on earth to a garnish. Something you sprinkle on rice for a pretty yellow tint. Why? Because you can't patent a flower. But you can patent a pill that does what the flower used to do and charge 40 times more for it. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on this spice. What it actually does inside your body, what the clinical research says, and why the pharmaceutical industry has spent decades trying to synthesize its compounds instead of telling you to just use the original. How we forgot the original medicine. Walk into any pharmacy today, look at the shelves. You'll find antidepressants that cost between $30 and $400 a month depending on insurance. Anti-inflammatory drugs that destroy your stomach lining over time. Painkillers that created the worst addiction crisis in modern history. The global pharmaceutical market hit $1.48 trillion in 2022. Depression drugs alone generated over $15 billion that year. Anti-inflammatory medications, another $35 billion. These are empires built on managing symptoms, not solving problems. And here's what nobody tells you. Many of these drugs were designed to do what one spice already did, but in a form that could be owned, patented, and sold at massive markups. Take antidepressants. The most common class, SSRIs, work by blocking the reabsorption of serotonin in your brain. More serotonin stays available. Your mood lifts. Side effects include nausea, weight gain, sexual dysfunction, insomnia, and in some cases, increased suicidal thoughts. The FDA has a black box warning on these drugs for patients under 25. Now take NSAIDs, your ibuprofen, your naproxen. They block an enzyme called COX-2, which reduces inflammation. That's how they kill pain. But they also block COX-1, which protects your stomach lining. So the drug that fixes your knee is eating a hole in your gut. The American Journal of Gastroenterology estimated that NSAID-related gastrointestinal complications send over 100,000 Americans to the hospital every single year. These are the known documented costs of the system we built. And the whole time, there's a flower sitting in a field in Iran, Greece, and Kashmir that targets the exact same pathways: serotonin, inflammation, oxidative stress, without destroying your organs in the process. But that flower can't be patented. It grows in dirt. It has been public knowledge for 3,000 years, and that is the problem. Not for you, but for the companies selling you the alternative. Here's where it gets interesting. Instead of telling you about saffron, the pharmaceutical industry did something else entirely. They started trying to isolate saffron's active compounds, crocin, crocetine, and saffronal, so they could create synthetic versions they could patent. The spice wasn't the problem, the business model was. 3,000 years of proof. Let's go back. Because the history of saffron as medicine isn't some folktale. It's one of the most documented healing traditions in human history. The earliest known reference comes from the Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BC in Egypt. This is one of the oldest medical texts ever found. It describes saffron as a treatment for gastrointestinal pain and kidney problems. The Egyptians weren't guessing. They recorded dosages, they noted preparations. This was systematic. The Greeks took it further. Hippocrates, the man Western medicine calls its founder, prescribed saffron for coughs, colds, stomach ailments, and insomnia. Galen, whose medical writings dominated European practice for over 1,000 years, listed saffron as a treatment for inflammation and as a mood enhancer. But here's where the real story begins. In the medieval Islamic world, scholars didn't just use saffron, they studied it. Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, wrote the Canon of Medicine around 1025 AD. It was the most influential medical textbook in history, used in European universities until the 1600s. In it, Avicenna documented saffron's effects on depression, respiratory illness, and pain. He described specific doses. He described preparation methods. He noted both the benefits and the risks of overconsumption. Medieval European hospitals, the great infirmaries attached to monasteries, kept saffron in their apothecaries as a staple. Records from the Benedictine monastery of St. Gall in Switzerland, dating to the 9th century, list saffron among the essential medicinal plants in their herb garden. The famous Plan of St. Gall, one of the oldest surviving architectural drawings in the West, actually shows the garden layout where these plants were grown. During the Black Death in the 14th century, demand for saffron exploded across Europe. People believed it could treat plague symptoms, the fever, the swelling, the unbearable pain. They weren't entirely wrong. Saffron's anti-inflammatory and immune-modulating properties would have provided real, measurable relief. The demand grew so extreme that in 1374, a shipment of 800 pounds of saffron heading to Basel, Switzerland was hijacked by a group of noblemen. 800 pounds. At today's prices, that shipment would be worth roughly $5 million. The theft triggered a 14-week armed conflict known as the Saffron War. That's a substance people were willing to kill for because they knew what it could do. And the proof isn't just in old books. Saffron cultivation has survived without interruption for over 3,500 years. The same crocus flower, the same harvesting technique, 3 stigmas picked by hand from each blossom, still practiced today in Khorasan, Iran, which produces over 90% of the world's saffron supply. The knowledge never died. It was just buried under a mountain of pills. What saffron actually does inside your body. Now let's talk about why it works, because this is where medieval intuition meets modern laboratory proof, and the results are not subtle. Saffron contains over 150 chemical compounds, but the 3 that matter most are crocin, crochetine, and saffronal. Each one does something different. Together they create a system that modern drugs try to replicate, one compound at a time, while saffron delivers all 3 simultaneously. Let's start with depression, because this is where the research is strongest. In 2014, researchers at Tehran University of Medical Sciences conducted a meta-analysis. That means they combined the results of multiple clinical trials to look for patterns. They analysed 5 randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. That's the gold standard in medical research. Their finding, saffron supplementation at 30 milligrams per day was significantly more effective than placebo for treating symptoms of depression. The effect size was comparable to standard antidepressant medications. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Affective Disorders went further. Researchers at Murdoch University in Australia gave 128 adults with mild to moderate depression either 28 milligrams of saffron extract daily or a placebo for 8 weeks. The Saffron group showed significant improvements in mood, anxiety, and stress scores. No serious side effects were reported. Here's the mechanism. Safranal, one of saffron's key compounds, works on the same serotonin pathway that SSRIs target. It inhibits the reuptake of serotonin in the synaptic cleft, meaning more serotonin stays active in your brain. But unlike SSRIs, Safranal doesn't sledgehammer the entire system, it modulates it. The effect is gentler. The side effect profile is almost non-existent at standard doses, and it gets worse for the pharmaceutical industry. Crocin, the compound that gives saffron its red color, is a powerful antioxidant. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. Once inside the brain, it reduces oxidative stress, which is one of the key drivers of neurodegeneration. A 2010 study at the University of L'Aquila in Italy found that crocin protected brain cells from damage caused by oxidative stress at rates comparable to established neuroprotective drugs. Then there's inflammation. Crocetine, the third major compound, inhibits the COX-2 enzyme. That's the same enzyme that NSAIDs target. But crocetine does it without blocking COX-1, the enzyme that protects your stomach lining. This means saffron delivers anti-inflammatory benefits without the gastrointestinal damage that sends 100,000 Americans to the hospital every year. One spice, 3 active compounds, hitting depression, neurodegeneration, and inflammation simultaneously. The medieval doctors didn't know the chemistry, but they observed the results for 3,000 years. The chemistry just proved them right. Why you never heard any of this? So if the science is this strong, peer-reviewed, published in major journals, replicated across multiple countries, why isn't your doctor telling you about it? The answer is simple. Follow the money. A month's supply of pharmaceutical-grade saffron extract costs between $15 and $30. A month's supply of a common SSRI, like sertraline, costs between $30 and $300, depending on your insurance and whether you're buying name brand or generic. Multiply that across 37 million Americans currently prescribed antidepressants, and you start to understand the math. The numbers tell you everything you need to know about the incentive structure. You can't build a $15 billion industry on a flower that grows in dirt. Here's what the pharmaceutical companies did instead. Starting in the early 2000s, multiple patent applications were filed for synthetic versions of crocin and crocetine. They weren't trying to give you saffron. They were trying to build a version of saffron they could own. A 2015 review published in the journal Pharma Reviews documented this trend. Researchers noted that pharmaceutical interest in saffron's compounds had skyrocketed, but almost entirely focused on creating patentable synthetic analogues, not promoting the natural source. The reason it disappeared from mainstream medicine is simple. You can't patent a crocus, but you can patent a molecule derived from one. And it gets worse. The medical establishment itself is structurally designed to ignore plants. Doctors in the United States receive an average of 19.6 hours of nutrition education across 4 years of medical school, according to a 2010 study published in Academic Medicine. 19 hours in 4 years. Herbal medicine, even less. Most physicians graduate without ever learning that saffron has clinical data behind it. They're not hiding it from you on purpose. Most of them genuinely don't know. They were never taught it existed. Meanwhile, the same universities running these saffron clinical trials are funded in part by pharmaceutical grants. The researchers publish the data. The doctors never see it. The supplement industry markets saffron alongside hundreds of unproven products drowning the real evidence in noise. And the patient sits in a waiting room, gets a prescription, and never hears the word crocin in their entire life. How to use saffron today. You don't need a medieval apothecary. You don't need a prescription. You need real saffron, the right dose, and the knowledge to avoid getting scammed. Here's exactly how to do this. Step 1. Source real saffron. This is the most important step and the one most people get wrong. The biggest problem with saffron today is fraud. Because it's expensive, roughly $10 to $15 per gram for quality threads, it is one of the most adulterated spices on earth. Cheap saffron is often dyed corn silk, safflower petals, or even paper fibers soaked in food coloring. Buy whole threads, not powder. Powder is almost impossible to verify. Look for deep red threads with a slight orange tip. If every thread is uniformly red with no variation, it's likely dyed. Real saffron smells like honey mixed with hay, not like nothing and not like chemicals. The best sources are Iranian saffron from Khorasan province, Spanish saffron labelled La Mancha with a denomination of origin certification, or Kashmiri saffron from India. Buy from specialty spice vendors, not generic grocery store brands. Step 2. Understand the dose. The clinical studies showing antidepressant and anti-inflammatory effects used 28 to 30 milligrams of saffron extract per day. That's a standardized supplement dose, not cooking saffron. For cooking, a typical recipe uses 15 to 20 threads, roughly 50 to 70 milligrams of whole saffron. The bioactive compounds are present but less concentrated than in a standardized extract. You have two options. First, use saffron regularly in cooking. Steep 15 to 20 threads in hot water for 10 minutes before adding to your food. This releases the crocin and saffronal into the liquid. Don't just toss dry threads into a hot pan, you'll destroy the compounds with direct heat. Second, take a standardized saffron extract supplement, 30 milligrams per day. Look for products standardized to contain at least 3.5% lepticrosolides, which is the marker that indicates meaningful levels of crocin and saffronal. Step 3. Know what to expect. This is not instant. Clinical trials showed measurable mood improvements within 2 to 4 weeks of daily supplementation. Anti-inflammatory benefits build over similar timelines. If you're expecting overnight results, you'll be disappointed. If you give it a month, the research says you'll notice a difference. Step 4. Know the limits. Saffron is powerful, but it is not magic and it is not a replacement for emergency psychiatric care. It is not appropriate for severe clinical depression without professional guidance. Doses above 5 grams, far beyond any normal use, can be toxic. Pregnant women should avoid supplemental doses, as high amounts of saffron have been historically associated with uterine stimulation. At 30 milligrams per day, saffron has an excellent safety profile, but more is not better. Respect the dose. Here's what your month looks like. Week 1, you notice the flavour, warm, earthy, slightly bitter. Week 2, you might notice subtle changes in mood or sleep quality. By week 4, the clinical research says the anti-inflammatory and antidepressant effects reach measurable levels. Your cost? Roughly $15 to $25 per month for a quality supplement. Compare that to your current pharmacy bill. The medieval physician with his saffron wasn't primitive. He was practicing evidence-based medicine. Evidence gathered over centuries of observation, written down in manuscripts, passed between cultures, refined with every generation. We didn't improve on that system. We replaced it with one that charges you monthly for access to what a flower does for pennies. The flower still grows, The science is published. The clinical trials are sitting in peer-reviewed journals right now. The only thing that was missing was someone telling you it existed. If you found this valuable, subscribe to this channel. Every week we dig up knowledge that was buried, not because it stopped working, but because it stopped being profitable. Tell us in the comments, are you going to try saffron as a supplement, in cooking, or both? And if you've already used it, what did you notice? Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and never stop digging.